So after the epic that was the engine teardown, strip, getting the cases blasted, finding some problems, more with corrosion than anything else, then the highs of somehow managing to get a brand new engine. I'm still not quite sure how I swindled that, but we are now on the home stretch. The KTM 950 Adventure project bike is going back together. Brand new motor, frame that looks like brand new with all the powder coating on it. Today we're going to get the engine in the frame, forks and suspension on, and make the thing look like a motorcycle again. There's a long way to go from that, but most importantly it will look like a motorcycle and we'll be on the home stretch. Let's get stuck in. Okay, I've got a handful of all the bolts I need. I've got grease, copper slip to put on them. These bolts are all engine bolts, so they're going to see a lot of temperature, so copper grease is the best stuff to use because it will then, when the grease melts off under temperature, the copper stays behind. That's the theory anyway. So yeah, no further delays. Let's get this frame on this engine, see if it is possible to do it as a one-man job. Without scratching the frame is the game as well. That's the scary bit. That's the scary bit with a brand new engine and a brand new frame. It's trying not to scratch it. One bolt is in. Great success. There we are. Swing arm pivot in. Look at that. There's an engine in a frame. That is bloody exciting. Now what comes in super handy with rebuilding the bike is getting a spare parts manual like this one. These are all downloadable online, but what you get is kind of the microfiche, well, it's not the microfiche, it's the exploded diagram of the bike with a list of part numbers next to it. Now the part numbers are only any good if you order new parts, but what it does tell you is which bolt goes in which hole, which bolts have washers on and nuts on, the order things go together. So when you've got a big box of bits and a big box of nuts and bolts, you can actually then work your way through and figure out, okay, that one goes there, that one goes there, which length bolt, which size head, which type of head, whether it's a nut or a lock nut. And we've got that for the engine and for the chassis, which is mega helpful in putting the thing back together, hopefully, hopefully in the right way. Otherwise, we're going to have to look back at all the videos of when we took it apart and work out what we did wrong there. So we've now got the engine loosely assembled in the frame. The main front brackets are on. The bolts are all in just loosely. Next job, put the swinging arm in place. The rear of the swinging arm, the rear of the engine mounts through the swinging arm pivot. So swinging arm pivot goes through the frame, through the swinging arm, through the back of the engine block, and out the other side. We've got new bearings ready to go in the swinging arm, so it's just a case of taking the weight off the engine, getting the bolt out, wiggling this, growing another pair of arms, and slotting it all back together, and then we'll have a swinging arm in the bike. One of the downsides to having everything nicely powder coated is very often the powder coating can be a little bit thicker than what was on the frame originally, so some things are a little tighter to fit than usual. On internal bores, like the insides of these bolts, it's easy just to whiz a cutter through them and clean the paint out, but yeah, when it's a big face like that, it was just a little bit tight, so I thought I'd give it a tap. Mint. Shock, like I said, actually still needs a bit of work. It's pretty rusty on the spring. I've been looking at alternatives to replace this shock. There's a few companies that do it, but the biggest problem is the KTM 950 uses what they call a PDS system, so it's got no linkage. So as the suspension goes through its travel, you kind of need it to stiffen up at the bottom end of the travel, which you normally do with a linkage. KTM's done that with what they call a PDS shock. So the shock increases its damping force, so stiffens itself up as you go through the travel, which means that buying another shock out of a motocross bike, I found a few that are the right length and have the correct ends, doesn't really work because they don't have the PDS system in them. There's some KTM motocross shocks that might operate in it and might work, but I think for now we're going to do some internal mods to this, get the spring repowder coated, and that's probably going to be a big step forward compared to the 45,000 mile old shock that's in it at the moment. Ow, it got my finger. This is the glamorous bit. Once again, as with the engine, I'm using the torque settings supplied by KTM. They're go on about it, but their manual's awesome. It's actually got all of the torque settings in the owner's manual for this bike, and even the details of, you know, whether to Loctite that bolt or not. So for the shock, it's 100 Newton meters for the top bolt and 45 for the bottom, and then the bottom bolt has a bit of dab of Loctite on it. Even tells you what Loctite to use, but obviously I'm just going to use the Loctite I've got at home. It would be better to use the proper one, but I think to be fair, this is the Loctite I'm supposed to use, but apparently there are different grades. Who knew? So after only a teensy-wincy bit of wrestling, and after dropping the shock on my finger only once, the cleaned up shock is in, the swing arm's attached, swing arm pivot's in, all the mounting bolts are on the engine itself. So the next job is to go through and torque everything up. Yeah, it's always worth using the torque settings from the owner's manual, especially when dealing with anything made of alloy. Steel seems to be a little bit more resistant, but yeah, it's just not worth guessing. You can guess and you can get it mostly right, but if you're doing an entire bike like this, and then you intend to go and race it or use it for a big trip, just, yeah, put your mind at rest. Do the torque settings in the manual. It takes 2 seconds. And on the subject of that, there'll be people who are commenting on the fact that I've greased the bolts. There's an old thing about if you grease a bolt up, it makes it slip easier when you're tightening it up, so you get a different torque reading. So it's always worth considering that. I'm aware of that, but the downside is these bolts are all pretty knackered, and I had to give them a bit of time on the wire wheel so the coatings come off most of the bolts. So I'm not about to put them in with no grease, because then they'll never come out again. So bit of grease, but steady away with the torque settings. Make sure everything's torqued up correctly. Then I can move on to putting the forks front wheel and rear wheel in and getting the thing back up on its wheels so it looks like a motorbike. Then I'm going to get excited and fit some accessories we've got, just because a little morale boost at this stage never hurts. And then it's on to the long-winded process of putting the wire and harness in and connecting it all up to the various connectors around the bike. Exciting. Rummage, rummage, crash bang. I'm coming. Hold fire. Be there in a sec. Yes, there we go. Special delivery. Big shiny box of good R&G bits. So, look, shiny carbon fiber stuff. So yeah, these are the engine case protectors. So we're going to slot them on now, which is going to be awesome. And of course, a set of swinging arm bobbins. That means we can put the bike on a paddock stand, which means that in a minute I can put a centre stand on it and a paddock stand, get it up in the air and put the forks in, which is awesome. So if you're an off-road type, these things will be a complete mystery to you. These are what originally started in road racing world. You used to bolt them to your swinging arm, and it meant that you could put a paddock stand. If you didn't have a bike with a centre stand, you could put a paddock stand under these, lift the rear wheel off the floor and put your tyre walls on. Just a chain, stuff like that. A bit of a sports bike thing, but tend to be fitted to more and more bikes these days because they're super useful. And I'm probably not going to run a centre stand on this bike. So I shall just have a set of swinging arm bobbins like this. And then the second use that R&G make them, they make them a little bit bigger and they make them out of nylon. So that if you do have a crash, it just gives that skids on the floor and it keeps your swinging arm away from the ground. And kind of more importantly, the end of your wheel spindle, which stops you grinding all the threads off. So this is how to fit a set of carbon fibre R&G Racing case covers onto your engine. For this job you will need a set of R&G carbon fibre engine case covers. You will need the glue that comes with them, that's part of the kit from R&G. A couple of extra bits you'll need: brake cleaner to clean all the grease and the oils off the engine. You'll need a bit of tape that will just help hold it all in place while the glue dries, and a sock. This is a medium thickness winter sock, not too fluffy, clean and unholy. That's just to use the brake cleaner. And allowed to dry off, it's time to apply the glue. Well, that was pointless, but I'm very proud of that. Next, pop the case cover onto the engine. Use your trusty sock to wipe away any excess residue. I mean, pants are fine, but socks are always nice because you can put your hand right up inside a sock and there's been less butt in them. Look at that. That's good already. Finally, a little bit of insulation tape just to help it stick in place while the glue's drying. Again, this is a lot easier if it's not -1,000 in your garage and your insulation tape sticks properly. 30 minutes later, peel the insulation tape off and we'll have a nice protected engine casing ready for off-road adventures and shenanigans. So next job is super exciting. It's the first kind of proper rally upgrade mod I've managed to get my hands on. These are the original KTM Forks out of my 950 Adventure. In this year of bike, they were, off the top of my head, they were 230 millimeters of travel because it was an early bike and it's a non-R model. The R models that KTM did had 265 or Adventure S, Adventure R, Adventure S. The S model in the 950 had 265 mil of travel. The rally bikes of the time, Mioni's one in particular, was over 300. It was like 330 mil or something ridiculous of suspension travel. I probably don't want to go that far, especially because a lot of the events and rallies I want to use this bike on aren't 100 mile an hour across the desert ones. They're rallies with a bit more technical terrain where probably for me being that high up off the ground isn't going to be any help. I've spoken to a few people about this, few kind of guys who've raced Dakar and raced rallies, and the point of having 330 odd mil of travel is so that when you hit that unseen rain gully, that washout in the desert, you survive it. That's kind of where that travel's for. The rest of the time, you don't quite need that much travel for getting across the terrain quickly. With that in mind, I phoned a good friend of mine at Trevor Pope Motorcycles, asked him what other KTM Forks would fit in this bike and give me a bit more travel. Now, obviously I could go and buy a rally fork or buy stuff, but the budget then spirals out of control. These forks are pretty tired. They've got some quite bad pitting on the chrome on the bottom of the legs, as well as needing the rebuild, and the outer legs are worn really thin. So I always kind of had in my mind, even though I've cleaned them up, that I wanted to replace them. And Trev Pope came up absolute trumps. So Trev, after basically a day of talking, or of looking up for me, he came back and he said, you want these forks, they're from a 2014 KTM SX250. The outer legs will fit in the standard yokes on the 950. They're a single disc, and I was planning to do a single disc conversion anyway, so that saves a bit of weight out of the legs. It's a more modern fork, so it's actually a closed cartridge design, which is a kind of next step on technology from the, I believe these are an open oil bath fork, so bit better fork, better damping control, and they're 300 mil travel. Now, my choice is then to either make the rear 300 mil of travel, or to shorten these to 265 and get the rear to 265, so this bike will effectively be a S model KTM Adventure, but obviously with way better forks. Handy little byproduct of this mod is that these forks are almost 1.5 kilos, maybe 2 kilos lighter than the forks I'm taking out. So I've got an upgrade, I've got more performance and less weight. And the axle in these forks is exactly the right size axle for the KTM 450 rally bike wheel that I've got for the front end. So actual Dakar rally bits going on my 950. Awesome. Ah, there we are. It even says on it, 2014 KTM 250 SX forks. That is what I'm fitting. As with the shock, these forks are gonna need a rebuild. They're gonna need a revalving and springing because they're designed for a bike They're currently set up for a bike that weighs 102 kilos, and they're going in a bike that, even with all the mods, is still going to weigh 200 kilos. So they will need new springs put in them. Temo. Oh, look at that. Trevor Pope, you are a magical wizard. It has to be said, there are bits of the motorcycle industry like this that I absolutely love, where you can phone someone out of the blue and they are a bastion of knowledge. They go, I'll have a quick check, and 24 hours later they've told you some obscure piece of information that lets you fit a awesome fork to your bike with very little modifications. That is awesome. So now we've got the world's most enormous forks fitted. I'm well pleased with them. They're going to be awesome. It's time to whack on set of handlebars. I've already got the clutch lever and everything ready on there. And I've also fitted what's called a Kyoko. It's a manual cruise control. Basically, it's a little threaded thing that goes on the end of your bar and then clamps against the throttle grip and holds the throttle steady on long motorway journeys, or in rally world, on liaison. I've always been intrigued by them. I'm personally a bit terrified about the thought of having something that just jams my throttle open, but I've heard good things from a few people. The way they actually work is you hold the clamp when you turn the throttle, and then that just puts a little bit of resistance, and then as you shut the throttle you hold the clamp still and it frees it off. There's also a lock-in screw so you can deactivate it or adjust the tension on the bar. I'm intrigued. I don't want to be a naysayer, so I'm going to give it a go. If it's as good as everyone says, it's going to be a handy little analog version of cruise control. But handlebars on, then we can get some wheels in. Now this little beauty is the front wheel that I'm putting in the bike for now. It's a actual ex-Dakar front wheel. It was used, I think, in a 2007 or 8 Dakar. Normally when guys go and race the Dakar, they've got a few wheels in stock. You need a few to change tyres on. You're always going to damage one. This one's actually got a bit of damage. You know, you've got a few dings in the rim here. So there is some damage on this wheel, but it's a XL rim with a Talon hub. So it's top quality kit. So I'm going to use it and run it as it is. You know, there's some bits where, you know, where it's been sat in someone's lockup for years, all the spokes have got a little bit of corrosion. So I'm going to tidy all that up. For now, I'm just going to run with the little dings in the rim. It will work fine for me. But I've always got the option of giving Talon a ring and getting them to relace a new rim into it at some point. Probably once I've added a few dents myself. And one of the things that I always find when you're doing projects is, like, certain partners and companies and people to phone up and work with are properly amazing. Like, so I mentioned Trev Pope earlier was awesome with the fork situation. I just phoned up and asked his advice, and he was like, yep, I've done loads of conversions, so I've got a little list of what forks are what sizes, and was super helpful as a way of, like, establishing what forks I needed. Talon and XL have been, well, Talon in particular is in the UK, have been awesome. Like, I've built a few project bikes and you just phone them up and they're happy to talk you through what you need for a wheel and build whatever you want, basically. So those guys have been awesome, but this project, EBC have kind of really come through on it. So the original KTM 950 discs that go on the 950 wheels are a non-floating disc like this one, so it's just rigidly fixed to the rim. That's fine, but then as the disc heats up and cools down, you get a bit of expansion, you know, it pushes the pads around. You don't quite get that fine brake control that we've all come to expect from modern adventure road bikes and from circuit bikes and stuff. So this, even this old rally wheel, this is a non-floating disc. So EBC now do floating discs for the standard KTM, and they do a floating disc for the rally bike as well. And I was kind of blown away. I phoned them up and I was like, I've got this random rally wheel with a Talon hub. Have you got a disc for it? And straight away the guy on the phone was like, I think it's this one. and he gave me some part number, and I was like, oh, I'll send you the dimensions. So I sent him all the dimensions, and he was right. It was like, there's obviously not that many discs, different discs around, but it blew my mind that I could phone someone, give them a vague description on the telephone, and they would just go, yep, this is the disc you want for that random wheel that you've pulled out of someone's lockup. And they've sent it out. So I've got... They have the snazziest boxes for discs as well. So I've got a set of double H sintered pads, which go into the stock KTM caliper. That's EBC's kind of good quality sintered high performance brake pad. It's not like a track pad or a race pad or anything. It's just a kind of, you know, not their basic pad, but their high performance road pad. They did say there's another couple of compounds I can work with if I find that this pad and disc isn't enough to stop a 200 kilo bike. But it's tricky because although effectively it's a 200 kilo motorcycle and I'm putting half the braking power I had on it, I've got a very high quality disc, high quality pads. I've reduced the weight of the wheels, I've reduced the weight of the bike, and I'm going to be running knobbly tyres on it, which means I can't use as much braking force as I would have used before anyway. So theoretically, one disc and good pads should be plenty, but if that's not enough, EBC have got options on pads and options on bigger discs, so it's going to be a suck it and see on that one. Bit of Loctite on the bolts, and disc on, and then my rally wheel is ready to go. Same as the front end, EBC has done us a number on a rear disc as well, a floating one again. It's very exciting when you buy parts that are never designed for this bike, and they almost bolt straight on. And again, same diameter disc, but I'm changing to one with these floating buttons, so it's a bit better under heat expansion. It's also shiny and new, so it looks a million times nicer. So while we're here, I'm going to change the rear sprocket as well. Not just because this one's an absolute mess, but I've actually opted for a upgrade sprocket, a Super Sprocket, which has got an alloy centre hub to make it lighter, and then a steel outer rim to make it stronger. It looks something like this. So you get the steel where your chain runs, so it lasts longer, and then an alloy hub, so it is lighter and weighs less. With the Super Sprocket, you get these nice little indented bits that the bolts drop into, which keeps it super kind of flush and nice, which I really like. So I wanted to keep using those. These ones are all rusty, so I'm going to rub them down and either paint or nickel plate them. Interestingly, I weighed the Super Sprocket and compared that to the weight of the original 42 tooth steel KTM sprocket, which is quite heavily cut out and machined, the same weight. So there's not actually a weight saving having the half alloy, half steel sprocket over the original KTM one, which I'm surprised about, but this is a much less cut out sprocket. I'll show you. That's the one that came off the KTM, so it's steel, but obviously it's very, very heavily machined out. So it's ended up being the same weight, which I'm guessing if you bought a cheap replacement sprocket, it wouldn't be as nicely machined as this, so the Super Sprockets would have an advantage then. But certainly against the OE one, not actually lighter. Both weigh 70 grams. So there's a interesting thing. It may be interesting, I don't know. But it does look really, really nice. So I'm happy to fit it on the prettiness grounds. So a little bit of waiting game on ordering parts, but still lots to be getting on with. Still plenty of bits. Look at that. That actually works with the standard caliper and everything. That's amazing. EBC, you have outdone yourselves with that disc. I can't believe the 450 rally bike wheel is so simple to fit to a 950. We'll check that sprocket spacing, but that is what I call a result. Look! Look! The 950 rally bike is looking like a rally bike at last. I am so excited. It's been a bit of a mission getting everything. As always, it doesn't take long to bolt a wheel in and bolt some shocks in, but when you've got to clean up every single bolt and re-grease it and find the bits you've left scattered around the workshop. And then again, making stuff that fits, so making wheel spacers, making the rear fit. It's been easier than I thought it was going to be, but yeah, it's been a long, long session. But the 950, after a long time, finally looks like a motorcycle again. Yeah, now's a really good section. Now is just, the next episode will be us throwing parts at this bike and getting it as assembled as we possibly can. We've got a few things on order still. I'm really excited to show you this, which is the snazzy GPR rally system for this bike. This is going to be a major deal. I'm very excited. How nice is the bag it comes in? Even that's exciting. But yeah, finishing in that beautiful big Brap rally exhaust on the side of the bike. Lighter, more power, look more like a rally bike. That is probably one of the most exciting bits at the moment. So titanium end can, big pile of bits. Yeah, I can feel it. I can already taste the first high side. It's gonna be savage.